Hunter, let us know if you have any concerns about it being recorded. I'd love to just check in with some quick introductions, if folks don't mind. So my name is Heidi Cloutier. I am from New Hampshire and the Creating Connections New Hampshire project. I work at the University of New Hampshire Institute on Disability, and we have a SAMHSA grant where we are developing a continuum of youth treatment supports in New Hampshire. And so my role has been working with Hannah Raish from Youth Move New Hampshire to develop a youth peer support model that can be replicable across the state of New Hampshire. So under that project, we have developed a lot of tools to help alternative peer groups get started and scale up in the state of New Hampshire. And so I am excited to share some Fidelity tools today. Hannah, do you want to introduce yourself next? That would be awesome. Thanks.
Sure. I am Hannah Raish, and I am the coach of the APG facilitators that are currently operating the 2 APGs that we have going in New Hampshire. And I've been working with Heidi, like she said, on building the infrastructure for replicating APGs at other sites throughout New Hampshire. And I will hand it over to Hunter so that there's no awkward silence.
Thanks. Hunter, before you introduce yourself, I forgot to ask, is there anyone willing to take notes for today's meeting? So John sent out an agenda. I'm a kind of a type A personality, so I drafted an agenda that I sent to John, and it's attached to that email if anybody is willing to take notes.
I can take notes, Heidi.
Awesome. Thank you, Hannah. Go ahead, Hunter.
Okay. Hey, I'm Hunter Welch. I'm with the Courage Center in Lexington, South Carolina. So I'm the program manager, and we're starting South Carolina's first alternative peer group.
Yay.
I'll pass it to James.
I'm James Runyon, and I currently volunteer with Bridges APG in Seattle, Washington. I'll pass it on to Robin.
I think you're feeling like I am this morning, James. So I'm Robin Bergeron. I am working with Bridges as the family program coordinator, the APG up in Seattle. And I'm out of sorts today because I'm getting all packed up and ready to finally move up there, have my permanent space finally. I've been going back and forth between Houston and Seattle for an entire year now. So I'm excited about that, but I got up at 5:30. I was super excited and thought, what am I doing up so early? So I'm here, but I'm not, and I have stuff to do. So I'll be coming on and off here, but I'm listening. So
great. Thanks a lot, Robin. Toby, do you want to go next?
I think that's you, Tim. Your name on the screen is Toby.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think that's me, it's Toby. It is Toby. No, it's not. Hi, I'm Tim Carpenter.
Today. Sorry.
Who's Toby? I don't know. My name is Tim Carpenter, and I'm with Hearthstone Houses in Houston, Texas. I'm sitting there. And we are a sober living facility. I work with Bill. He keeps me in line, as you can tell. I'll just pass that over, I guess, to Toby or Bill. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Bill, and I work with Tim at Hearthstone House on the family side of the business.
Oh, great. I'm glad you could be here. And I should have mentioned that in New Hampshire, we have 2 alternative peer groups who are not on the call, Live Free Recovery in Newton, New Hampshire, and Seacoast Outright in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. So we, and Hannah, please feel free to jump in, for any of these tools. Hannah's been really instrumental, in helping us design a lot of the tools and supporting documents for all our alternative peer groups in New Hampshire. And we want these to be public sourced and, available to any other APG that could benefit from them. So I will go ahead and share my screen and just talk a little bit about kind of Fidelity tool. Actually, let me just talk about Fidelity tools before I share my screen so I can see all of your beautiful faces. We at the Institute on Disability are really interested in implementation science. And implementation science is really about how organizations or human behavior changes. And so we, any new initiative that we look at starting, we like to use the implementation science framework to think about, how we'll implement that. And so a big piece of implementation science is ensuring that we understand what the key elements of any intervention is. And so very early on, we convened stakeholders across peer support in New Hampshire, as well as treatment providers and family support providers to identify what are the key elements of an alternative peer group that we would want to start up in New Hampshire. And we developed a resource called an APG practice profile. And that resource is on our website that I shared out with John as well. I think he forwarded on our website. So feel free to check out any of those materials. So the APG practice profile really specifically identifies what are the core elements that we want to be in place in any alternative peer group that is implemented in the state of New Hampshire. And then from there, what we do is, we use that document to really think about, how do we need to train alternative peer group facilitators? I'll pull it up. Thanks, Hunter. Oh, it's not there. Sorry, I thought that it was. My apologies. So I will just pull it up and post it in the chat while I'm talking. So then we use that practice profile to design training for alternative peer group facilitators and to think about how we'll assess progress, kind of evaluate whether or not the alternative peer groups are successful. And then to also think about, how do we assess whether or not the alternative peer groups that are being implemented in New Hampshire are being provided in a way that we designed with the original model. And so that's really called assessing fidelity. And so we looked at a few different fidelity tools and used the practice profile to flesh out what I'm going to share with you first is the coach's fidelity assessment. And so we envision in New Hampshire that alternative peer group facilitators would be overseen by a coach, and a coach might be a little bit different than a supervisor in that the coach really focuses on best practices within the particular intervention. Hannah, is there anything else you would say about coaching, or feel free to just interrupt me?
I would say you're talking quickly, and it might be something new to like other people who aren't familiar with implementation science or just like haven't necessarily built coaching or fidelity assessment into their APG yet. So I guess I just wonder if people have questions yet. They understand your quick talk, Heidi. That's good.
Right. I know. I'm noting how much time we have, and I'm like, oh, this is like really not enough time to go through both of these assessments. And so, given that most folks might not have coaches in place, maybe it makes sense to start with the youth peer support group fidelity assessment that we developed back in the spring. And so I'll share this and kind of talk you through how we developed this. And are you seeing them? No, you're not seeing that. I shared the wrong screen.
No, I think we saw it.
Oh, you were. Okay, sorry. It wasn't. It usually gives me a green outline. Okay, so this is the youth peer support group fidelity assessment, and how we originally envisioned this going was that we have related to creating connections New Hampshire, the evidence-based treatment model that is being used is called the 7 challenges, and we originally were thinking that youth peer support specialists would participate in the the 7 challenge groups that are facilitated at the community mental health centers. And so this Fidelity assessment was actually aligned with that 7 challenges treatment model. And it's designed for alternative peer group facilitators or anyone providing peer support in this kind of group format to use as a self-assessment, but then also to be administered by a coach or a supervisor who might be overseeing that peer support specialist. We were recommending that it be used a minimum of every 6 months with youth peer support specialists. And so you can see as we go down, and so we left the what Fidelity is blank, you'll see here. So just below the instructions, it says fidelity of implementation is achieved with a score of. And so when we think about fidelity of implementation, the kind of definition of fidelity is that an intervention is being provided, as it was designed. And so we want most features in place to assess that it's being provided with fidelity. So most is often determined to be 80%, but our thought was when we developed this that we wanted folks who were supervising and facilitating alternative peer groups or youth peer support to pilot this and kind of assess themselves and let us know if that was a realistic fidelity score to include on here, which is why it's blank. And so at the top, there's just identifying information for the youth peer support specialist and the name of the person and their role that would be completing this form. And then the location of the host organization. So for example, originally we had a peer support specialist from Youth Move New Hampshire going into one of our community mental health centers and participating in a group. And so it might be that the clinician that was overseeing that group might be the person who was filling out this form based on how the youth peer support specialist was interacting in that group. Or it might be Hannah who supervised that youth peer support specialist, depending on how much she also participated in that group and oversaw how the youth peer support specialist was interacting. Does that make sense about who would complete this form? And we always want to, as we think about kind of best practice, we always want, individuals to self-reflect on how they're doing as well. So we broke this down into, I think it's 5 different skills here. Sorry, as I scroll. So there's 5 different skill domains: engagement, cultural competence, one that's specific to 7 challenges, one on professionalism, and one on communication. And under each of these domain skills, I'm sorry if you're scrolling, it makes me nauseous. Then we have folks go through and assess, is this something that needs development? Is it an emerging skill, or is there evidence of mastery? And just so you know, what we have been doing, this month is we have been revising this tool, which is why I was going to hold off kind of introducing this tool. So I'm expecting, what I communicated to John is I'm expected that our new fidelity assessment, or revised fidelity assessment, will be in a final draft form in 4 to 8 weeks, and that I would love to share it with you all, once we get to that point, and again, have you guys give feedback, so we can make revisions on it before widely distributing it. That APG fidelity assessment would be used with specifically with APG facilitators, either in a group format or if they're following up one-on-one with a youth based on something that might have happened in the group. And what we have tried to do, or what we're doing, moving forward, is we're aligning the APG facilitator fidelity assessment to SAMHSA SAMHSA's recovery competencies, and then crosswalking that with the practice profile that we developed based on stakeholder input, which is a lot of technical aspects, so I apologize. But
Yeah,
it's
just to clarify something. So currently this tool is called the Youth Peer Support Group Fidelity Assessment. And our youth, so what we're going to do is like name it something different to reflect that it is not any longer going to be an assessment based out of the 7 challenges model that we're using. We're going to be renaming it to reflect that it's an APG facilitator fidelity assessment. And then, so at this point, that's not loaded onto the website that you were talking about. So we wouldn't be disseminating this until our smaller New Hampshire group like has a draft that we've crosswalked with SAMHSA's core competencies for peer support and recovery. Is that what you meant?
yeah, yep, right. Yeah, as well as our New Hampshire practice profile that we developed for APG. Yeah, right. And I'm anticipating that that's going to take anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks to get that kind of a final draft done to share out with folks. So, you know, later in the spring, you know, we'll follow up and share that tool. And so, you know, there are 5 skills under engagement, and then under cultural competence, there's a couple of skills, and then several under the 7 challenges structure, and then about 7, I think, under professionalism. And then the way that this is, and then communication, there's 4 skills that are identified under here. And there are a few that we've identified that were missing, I think, recently for key APG facilitator skills, you know, namely just around kind of protecting privacy and confidentiality. I'm not sure that that was really explicit in this one originally. And so then at the bottom here, whoever is administering this, you know, whether if I'm using it as a self-reflection, then I would score it up for myself, or, you know, if Hannah was supervising me, you know, she might go ahead and score this. And then out of the possible number of points in that category, calculate a percentage in that particular domain, as well as the overall score. And the score, you know, I mean, we're shooting for an 80%, right? And ideally an 80% in each domain. But the really important piece, I think, of administering any fidelity assessment is to really focus on professional development, right? So kind of celebrating what are folks doing well, and identifying areas where they could improve. And so the fidelity assessment would be used to help the APG facilitator or the youth peer support specialist identify what's working well, you know, what coaching or support might they need moving forward, and they could use this as a discussion point with their coach or supervisor. And so that's what this section is here on the bottom. Are there any questions about that? No. Okay. All right. So I am going to then switch to the, let me see, I'll pull up the coach's fidelity assessment, which is here. Oh, John's back. Hey, how's it going?
Oh, it went fine. It didn't take very long. I happened to pop in right when they were ready for my report, and I just did it. Voila, I'm back.
Okay, that's great. That's great.
Cool.
So John, can you just enable screen sharing? Because I think it gave you back host privileges. And let me see.
Oh, cool.
And so disabled my ability to share. So we just went through the youth peer support specialist fidelity tool. So it's
All
under.
right, I just made you co-host again. How about that?
Okay. Nope. So that's not going to work. Go. Oh, okay. Actually, yep. So I can set it myself. Okay. All right. Great. So.
Sorry.
No problem. No, it's totally fine. The screen sharing, it's annoying. Zoom makes you enable it every time. It's you know, one of their newer security features. Uh, so you have to go under security to enable screen sharing. So this is the Alternative Peer Group Coaches Fidelity tool. And again, you know, the coach we're envisioning, you know, in some alternative peer groups or some organizations, it might be their immediate supervisor. In New Hampshire, we have Hannah supervising all of that, or not supervising, I'm sorry, providing coaching, which is just focusing on their best practices and not necessarily, you know, the day-to-day work that's happening in the APG, which their supervisors on site, you know, are attending to. And so we envision that alternative peer groups across the country might have a slightly different model, right? And you might not be having kind of the same kind of coaching that we are having. But essentially, whoever's providing the support to the alternative peer group facilitator would also, we would also want them to have some fidelity checks, right? And so we would assess, you know, in New Hampshire, we would use this tool with Hannah, who is providing that coaching. And we would recommend that that the coach use the tool as a new coach monthly to self-reflect and seek feedback from their coach or supervisor. But then over time, you know, they might move to administering this quarterly or every 6 months, you know, as their coaching skills progress. And again, thinking about, you know, we want coaches to be providing support, the supports that APG facilitators need in a timely fashion, you know, and that no one is going to be perfect, but striving for, you know, most of those core competencies being in place. We would look for a fidelity score of 75% or higher in each domain. And again, we would look for feedback from you all around this. And so we've identified, again, several different domains. So there's the core peer support domain. And we would have whoever is overseeing the coach. So it might be, you know, Hannah's direct supervisor, you know, or it might be project director. Sorry, I'm going to sneeze. Sorry about that. And then, you know, also having the coach use this as a self-reflection. So under the core peer support domains, you know, we talked about strengths-based, you know, using personal experiences, you know, accessing community supports and self-advocacy, encouraging APG facilitators to reflect on what enthusiastic recovery is. And then in this next domain around relational, we focus on collaboration and rapport building skills, conflict resolution, and providing feedback to strengthen the work of the APG facilitator. And then under specialized skills and knowledge, we have crisis prevention, recognizing one's own trauma, identifying secondary trauma concerns, and really being preventative to try to minimize any effects of secondary trauma, as well as environmental trauma, promoting self-care practices, cultural responsiveness. And then there's a collaboration domain that looks at responsive communication. And so thinking about, you know, being accessible to APG facilitators in a timely, responsive manner. And then having clarification about the role of coach and, you know, privacy concerns and confidentiality that go along with that. Appropriate boundaries, real-time planning and reflection with the alternative peer group facilitator. And then there's another domain here around professionalism and self-care that looks at the effective use of supervision or coaching, for the coach, and then coaching the APG facilitator, and then engaging in professional development activities and continuing education, and then work-life balance and wellness. And then same thing at the bottom here, there's an opportunity, you know, as a coach to self-reflect and score how they did in each of these domains, or their supervisor or coach to fill out with them based on the maximum points available in each domain, what their percentage would be, to then use that to build out a professional development plan.
So Heidi, I would wonder, have people used like the coaching model or the like idea of coaching in their own experiences with APG? Because I don't think that I've heard anybody outside of New Hampshire really talk about having a coach and a supervisor. So I'd just be curious what people's experiences are here.
James, I think you're muted if you were talking. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was talking to Michelle real quick, asking her a quick question.
Sorry.
So,
did you want to say something?
Yeah, well, first, I just wanted to say, Heidi, this is absolutely righteous. This is like incredible. But
the credit goes to a ginormous team in New Hampshire who has worked diligently on these tools. So I will share your accolades.
yeah, well, our organization, there's just 3 of us. So I really play a role of facilitator, coach, and supervisor. So I think ideally, if we hired more people, we can separate those. But right now, it's all me.
Hunter, do you have a job description that like speaks to any of these points for yourself? Like, are you tasked with making one for yourself?
Well, so I guess my title is program manager, but you know, I don't know if there's an official job description for it. It's really just whatever needs to get done, get it done. So we're just growing and trying to document things as we go.
Because I wonder if this could also be helpful for you. Like you said, you have 3 people. It could be helpful to like use this to break down who's like, I don't know, to delegate who's doing what amongst the 3 of you. And probably this isn't like like there's probably more that we've missed that we could add to this, certainly, I'm sure. And so maybe that would be a good starting point for drafting something that sort of more explicitly states roles and responsibilities of, well, that need coverage in your specific APGs.
And I think as you know, as we think about implementing alternative peer groups in New Hampshire and scaling up, you know, we recognize that there are, you know, some particular occupational concerns, right? That folks are often sharing traumatic events and stories with facilitators, and that it's important for facilitators to get some assistance in you know, building their self-care strategies and kind of protection against vicarious trauma or secondary trauma, but then also, you know, looking at providing career paths as well, you know, so that as you know, often with many of our interventions, what happens is that, you know, there are some rising stars that kind of shine and get promoted to supervisory positions, right? And so you might very likely have alternative peer group facilitators who are doing tremendous work and, you know, might take on a mentor role or a coaching role with the new alternative peer group facilitators to grow their skills and kind of focus on best practice. And so in New Hampshire, we're trying to be really intentional about building in some of those systems support to preventatively, I think, proactively address some of the occupational barriers and concerns.
Just a note from history on the question you were asking about, do they, are there supervisors and then coaches and then, facilitators? If you'll notice all these different words, facilitators, counselors, coaches, supervisors, all of this, different thing. The answer is, going back to, oddly enough, those sheets of those 30-day medallion, the number of them. At that time in that program, I believe there were 285 full-time employees. Okay. So you can imagine the organization necessary to make that work, but that's no way you can facilitate those numbers, creating those kind of 30-day and year medallions without that kind of thing. There were also residential programs, there were sober living programs, there were IOPs, there were the meetings and all those kind of things. Yes, we had the equivalent of those different levels of supervision. We did not have as much organization as this kind of document will help us provide. I loved the term you used when you said, as you grow into these things. We did not have that to grow into. It would have been nice to have had it. Lots of mistakes and losses were made, as that growth. And I will tell you, I've seen programs, big, strong, well-funded, long history programs fall apart and fail because not having these kinds of things to judge and help and support the different levels of employees. And that includes supervisors and the line people, all of them. You get a supervisor in place who doesn't understand the skills described and the processes described in these sheets, it'll blow your program up. It'll blow it up. And a lot of times, if you're having to look at other people and where and how do they perform these skills that are described on these sheets, Heidi and Hannah, then it will call you to task too, to take a look at some of your own stuff that you need to. So I'm just thrilled over the presence of this. I think it's really neat, can be very helpful. I know it's going to be helpful to wherever Lifeway goes in their adult program. There is one thing I did want to also say. All of these things apply to it. I was looking as real carefully trying to pick out the things that only applied to adolescents. There weren't any. Yeah. They all apply to adults too. Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. I just wanted to chime in, not take anyone's time, but it's a spectacular tool. And look forward to getting more of that type of access to that kind of work that you're all doing. Thank you.
I don't know if you guys have, does everybody have access to what Heidi and her group were good enough to provide as far as the Dropbox? All of these things can be found, and a lot of other stuff are in a Dropbox. If you don't have it, access to it, you might want to get in touch with Heidi so she can send you how to do that. I'm too inept to figure it out. Thank God she's here.
And I can try to pull it up and put it in the chat too. So there's a Google Drive that I set up for just for the alternative peer group work to share out information. Let me see if I can find it. But then I also put my email address in there, and in the link to our website as well. Let me just see if I can dump this in the chat. I think I enabled the settings so that anybody can access it.
It's in the chat. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, and I'll put the Google Drive link in as well. Okay, I just got it. And then yes, so I would love for you all to, pilot these tools, give us feedback, maybe we could put on the agenda in a month or so, just kind of circling back to see if anybody has any feedback. But you could also email me feedback either by tracking changes in the document and send me, a document with your proposed changes, or just an email with bullets on, what about this, or any questions that you have. And I'll bring that back to we we have a subcommittee, an APG subcommittee that works on all of this document development that includes folks from various peer support organizations as well as the Institute on Disability. So we'll consider your suggestions and revisions and all of that. And let me actually, if we have a moment, maybe I'll just go to our website, if that's okay, and just share, just kind of walk you through, how to access materials on our website. So here we go. So this is the Institute on Disability website, and there's a section there on creating connections. If you want to learn more about the Creating Connections project, then you can just click on that top one. But I'm bringing you directly to alternative peer groups. This is the landing page. This is a great YouTube video that some of our youth peer support leaders developed with some frequently asked questions about alternative peer groups and just some basic information about alternative peer groups, who is providing alternative peer groups in New Hampshire. And then most of, I guess I'll just walk down the tabs here. So news and updates, so there's just anything current is on here. If I scroll down to a year or so ago, you'll see we joined the, oh no, it's not on there. Maybe they took it off. I was going to say, at some point there was like, we've joined the National Association of Alternative Peer Groups. It's not current news anymore, right? But so there's 3 sections really around the implementation tools, and I just wanted to explain that. So the coaches resources include information for kind of supervisors or coaches who are overseeing APG facilitators. So there's an APG coaches checklist on here that you can see. To think about, like, each time you're working with an APG facilitator, what are some considerations, or if you're just getting started, what that looks like. We've shared the ethical dilemma training scenarios that the team developed, and then you all helped develop coaching prompts, which is just below that, which is great. And then there's some alternative peer group facilitator resources, and so there's an open house checklist that we developed. There's a coaching log to keep track of when you're providing coaching and to whom. There's a shadowing log for alternative peer group facilitators. And so the expectation is that in New Hampshire, that when alternative peer groups are being trained, that they need to shadow someone who has more experience. And so the shadowing log helps them kind of keep track of that. And there's some prompts for them to think about what should they do before, during, and after a shadowing experience. And so that what I just explained was the shadowing guide. And then there's a tracker. We are anticipating moving towards certification for our APG facilitators. And so it will be important for APG facilitators to keep track of those requirements. And then the Youth Peer Support Specialist Code of Ethics and Practice is under there as well. And then there are some oversight team resources as well, if we head down. And this is really at the organizational level. And so thinking about for groups that are just getting started, we want them to, is it sharing? Sorry, I think it was just sharing something it shouldn't have been sharing there. So this is the alternative peer group implementation checklist. And so this is really a Fidelity tool that we would envision, and it's not as pretty as those other ones. This was one of our earlier tools that we developed. So we're hoping to revise this to make it prettier as well. But it kind of walks through key elements that we think need to be in place in order for an alternative peer group to start up and really be sustainable and effective over time. And so that's an important document, I think. And then there's an action plan that goes along with that as well on the website. And then there's a referral log for keeping track of, when referrals come into the alternative peer group. There's a social media policy, and we have a bunch of other materials that we're hoping to get up here, soon. But just wanted you to be
Are these also in the Dropbox on the Google
Yep.
side?
So,
Okay, good.
yep.
I
So
thought I'd seen them.
Yeah. So the Google Drive folder probably doesn't have the most recent versions that are prettiest. Yeah. But
Well, if it ain't pretty, ain't easy.
yeah, there's some version in the Google Drive folder as well.
I wanted to ask you real quick before we run out of time. In your facilitator certification process in New Hampshire, are you guys, I don't know, are you, let me put it this way, NADAC is doing a lot of peer certification and peer licensure everywhere. I'm the regional vice president, and I sit on I sit on a bunch of committees with NADAC at the national level. I am sure that they just picked up a contract in Arkansas doing the training and certification of peer recovery specialists there. And I'm sure that they would love to put a national element to what you guys are doing. So let's have some more conversations after this, and maybe we can pull Cynthia in on it. She's the CEO, and
yeah, that sounds great.
expand. Yeah.
Super. Yeah, so thank you guys. I really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you, Hannah, for jumping in and translating. And then, just one last question that I had was really about the upcoming AAPG conference, and whether or not there are like particular strands or needs, of the conference. I know we have a couple of organizations in New Hampshire that we're thinking about submitting some proposals. Are there particular needs that folks see for the conference?
This thing you just did would be a great presentation to do.
Fidelity assessments.
Okay,
yeah.
there's other things. A lot of what's in that Dropbox would lead towards different presentations need to be made in the AAPG board meeting yesterday, along with a lot of other things that were discussed. One of the things was, of course, the upcoming conference. And one of the things that we really want input from everybody about, by the way, did you mention that the 29th is the big doodah?
I did not. Friday, right. This Friday is the deadline for conference proposals. So, folks need to be working on getting them in.
Yes. And also we've got Dropkick Murphys.
Right. We have
a show coming up. Look at James. James, you're too old. You can't. I'm sorry. You're not invited.
Dropkick Murphys are from my time. They've been around a lot longer.
Right.
But in the conference, one of the things that we're working as hard and fast as we can in the direction of, and by the way, on the limitations on when the different proposals for presentations can be turned into for the conference, the ARHE APG National Conference. Remember, you have some friends in high places, and if we need something to present to people who are trying to maintain or build APGs and it misses the deadline, well, we've got an ability to push things in different levels.
So
well, that's one thing. Don't take advantage of it. The other thing, this is super important. This year, we are working really hard on creating, in the past, the AAPG element of the conference has always been organizers and staff, people of APGs. Historically, we've had conferences, however, in the old days, where the clients and the families were involved in the national conferences. We are looking very hard at trying to create some tracks this year so that the families and the clients can be involved also, can register and come. So as you're thinking about things you might do, one of the things like we were talking about having a a family panel, you know, as one of the presentations.
Yeah.
And an Ask It basket as one of the presentations. In addition to that, they're also doing a lot of self-care elements in the conference, where there'll be rooms you can just talk and about things like that. So you guys get creative, think about this, get involved. It's awesome. And Heidi, would you please send me, you'll probably, I think you're probably recording to your computer.
I'm recording to the cloud so I can send it to you through the
Okay.
cloud.
And then I can send it back out to everybody and put it on the site.
Just to circle back. So John, are there particular strands identified for the APG portion of the conference?
Last year, there's always a kind of a set of presentations. They all have to do with, there's history, of course, you know, there's always that, major elements, dealing with families, you know, ethics, the typical, hey, you want to start an APG, here's the basic things to do. Then on top of that, there are, each year there's different things that get sent, you know, what needs to go in there this year. As I said, we need some help in creating the tracks for the families and the clients. We also probably need, well, training, like I said, what you just did, the Fidelity elements, that would be really good to put into it, you know. Cultural issues. We always do it, but we could always use more.
Yeah.
It's easy to talk about the problem. It's much harder to find a solution. Much, much harder. And I would love to tell you, we have some great examples where solutions were found. We do not. We have a few at times where they were found. They also didn't, well, one of them didn't last, and the other one is constantly in danger of not lasting, because what happens is usually the cultural issues are solved by some sort of funding that can come and go. And when it goes, the solutions are gone.
Right.
So anything, you know, all of that kind of thing, marginalized groups, how do we get out there and help everybody?
Right.
You know, and stay out there helping everybody? Those kind of things.
Great. Is there a time that it closes? So I know we're in different time zones. Like what time does the, and I apologize, I haven't looked at it recently. You know, I looked at it when it first came out, I think. Is it like a portal or is it just an email?
You're talking about for
the conference submissions?
You know, I don't know.
Yeah, right.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Right. No, that's all right. I know that like some of them, when they're set up in a portal, like it closes at 5 o'clock or something. And I'm always
this
like,
year, I'm not sitting on that committee, so I'm not in there every week in those meetings. But Annette, see, I have moved, I'm now the past chairman of the board, and Annette Edens is the chairman now. And so I want y'all to get to know each other, by the way. And so get ready, because I've already talked about you guys. So all of you, by the way, you're all in trouble. So get ready. But again, I take you back to that list of lives saved, that stack of paper. It's not paper, it's people's lives and changes in what's happening. What we're doing is so incredibly important. Thank God. Y'all weren't privy to this. The CEO of NADAC met with the top end of the Biden transition team. I met with some members for an hour and a half. I think I told y'all that, but the CEO met with the big boys. They said that this administration, their top 3 priorities are COVID, economics, and substance use crisis. I've never heard that before, ever. I've never even heard top 5, much less top 3. So we have a great opportunity, it looks like, to really move ahead with something. So y'all do it, all right? I have to go.
Yeah, have a great week.
I love you guys. Thank you so much. Again, my favorite time of the week. Tap. Yay, us! Talk to you guys later.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Have a good one.
Thanks again, Heidi and Hannah.